SpongeGex here with more of my Mario Party review series. Today I'm looking at Mario Party The Top 100, released in 2017, 19 years after the original Mario Party released in Japan. The Top 100 was the third and last entry on the 3DS, and it is the worst reviewed and worst selling entry in the entire series. This game was announced as a big celebration of the Mario Party series, with the most number of minigames at the time out of any entry, all being so-called fan favorite picks across the first 10 entries of the series. Sadly, this game excludes minigames from the handheld entries. It would have been cool to see some minigames from Mario Party DS remade for the 3DS. Now, most entries usually have a range between 70 or 80 minigames on average, so with the top 100 having the most minigames, that sounded like a really big deal, but it kind of ruins the record when all the minigames are just remade or rehashed ideas. Mario Party The Top 100 is a harsh reality that the minigames alone are not what make the Mario Party games great. It's also the board maps, the coins, the stars, the modes, the features, and the time spent with family and friends that really make these games stand out, for better or worse. Despite having the most minigames in the series at the time, the rest of the game is very empty. There's barely any modes or features. It has the smallest roster we've seen since Mario Party 4, consisting of the original roster of 8 characters from Mario Party 3, except Donkey Kong was once again taken off the roster and replaced with Rosalina. I mean, come on, we just got him back in Mario Party 10 and they kicked him out already? It was kind of cool to be able to play some of these mini-games from previous entries when the characters weren't there before, like playing the Mario Party 1 and 2 mini-games as Waluigi, Daisy, or Rosalina, but it's just not enough to make up for the rest of the game's shortcomings. The main feature of the game is called the Top 100, which is just a minigame select mode similar to the free play modes from previous entries. And then there's a new version of the pesky minigame island single player challenge from the first Mario Party game, except it's more ridiculous than before. I think what made the original board map so cool was how it felt like a 3D version of the world map of Super Mario World, but with little things in the background that remind us of the minigames we played throughout the game. And so they tried duplicating that here, but it's just done in like a really side-scrolling looking fashion, very similar to the world layout in Super Mario 3D Land, and it's honestly not as fun or exciting as the board map from the first Mario Party game. And so this one is obviously more ridiculous than the original Mario Party's minigame island, since Mario Party had a very small amount of minigames, only 50. So now they expect us to 100% 100 minigames, and they still have the stupid life system, so if we get a game over, we gotta start over from a certain checkpoint. And yeah, a lot of these minigames are very dumb luck minigames, so it's very unfair to keep taking lives away from you until you get it right. It's not my fault these minigames require dumb luck to win, Nintendo. It's like the dumbest system I've ever seen when it comes to a single player mode. The Mario Party single player modes, these games are built for multiplayer. It makes no sense to try building single player challenges out of something like that. And then, not to mention, to make matters worse, there's also a ranking system. So it actually will let us pass if we at least get second or third place in some of the mini games. However, if we want to 100% it, get all the mini stars, we have to get first place in all of them. It's a total waste of time. Don't bother wasting your time on this mode. So there's only one board map in this game, and it's very similar to the Balloon Bash mode from Star Rush, but it's even worse. The board map is very small, there's no coins scattered across the board map at all. The only way to get coins is through the minigame balloons, and the way the minigames are selected is really dumb. We either choose a preset minigame pack, or we pick 5 minigames ourselves that we want to play at the beginning of each game. And every time we have to play a minigame on the board map, each player has to pick one of the 5 minigames they chose from their packs, as the roulette spins, and it will randomly select one of the players' minigame picks. Now, there's nothing wrong with the idea of letting players choose which minigames they want to play across the board map. I still think Nintendo Cube should make a future entry where we have a checklist which allows us to disable or enable which minigames will possibly show up on the board map. I think that would be a really good thing to do. It would be a dream come true to be able to shut off all the dumb luck minigames we hate and focus only on the ones that we actually enjoy playing. The Top 100 really fumbled this minigame selection requirement. Why was this not an option? Why couldn't the minigames be selected like before, just randomly? I think they intended this to be a way for human players to express themselves by showing other players what their favorite minigames are, but there could have been easier and better ways to do this, like letting each player create their own profile, where they can then list their favorite minigames from there. And then they can be shared through meeting other players through Street Pass, where you go like, oh, okay, this guy likes this. But yeah, it's pretty much useless because the 3DS connectivity is dead now. So this is honestly the worst board mode I've ever seen in a Mario Party entry. I mean, what other modes in Mario Party games only have one board map? That is ridiculous. And this is coming from a guy who actually likes Star Rush. I mean, the board map gameplay is basically very similar to the one in Star Rush, but it ruins the point and fun of it. I mostly preferred Toad Scramble over Balloon Bash, but at least Balloon Bash had 3 levels to choose from, and better board layouts, along with more randomly selected minigames instead of whatever was going on in the top 100. There's also the fun Decathlon mode for Mario Party 5, but it now has no visual theming to make this mode stand out from the ones that we've seen previously, so it comes off as the most forgettable Decathlon mode in the entire series. There's even a collection mode dedicated to showing box art and artwork from past entries, but it's incredibly vague and underwhelming. You know, I remember how the Sonic Genesis collection for GameCube and PS2, they had much better showcasings of Sonic's past games, complete with actual screenshots and video clips, better selections of artwork. It really felt like a celebration to Sonic's past. So for a game all about celebrating Mario Party's past history, this game doesn't seem too excited about sharing its history with its fans. It just feels like a huge letdown to fans of the past games, while doing absolutely nothing to get new fans excited for the series going forward. I think one of the biggest flaws of this game is that it was made for a handheld. It makes no sense to have an anniversary game for a console series with remade minigames to be on a console that's weaker than the consoles that ran Mario Parties 4 through 10. This idea should have been made for the Wii U instead. The Wii U would have been able to handle these minigames a lot better, both visually and control-wise. The Wii U would have had enough power to handle all 100 of these minigames and offer even more side features. It was all wasted on the 3DS's limitations. Now onto the minigames themselves. Since I've already gone over all of these minigames in the past reviews I've done for this series, I'm not going to re-describe them fully. Instead, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to say whether I think the remakes of these minigames were remade better or worse than their original versions, while pointing out a few differences. I'm going to judge whether they deserve to be considered one of the series' top 100 minigames. Personally, I think it's a bit of a stretch because while there are a lot of minigames across the series and there are plenty of good ones, I'm not sure if I'd really call a lot of them good enough to be considered top 100 material. And many of the ones in this collection are very questionable choices. Some of them are the most forgettable or frustrating minigames ever. It's like, why did you pick this over much better choices? And I know that was a major criticism that this game got. A lot of players did not end up agreeing with the minigame choices on this. So I'll tally up the numbers and say how many of these minigames were indeed top 100 material. But I will not be ranking these minigames. That would just take way too long, and personally, I don't even know what I would consider like a personal top 100. I don't think I'd really be able to think that out very well. So it's worth mentioning that these minigames were reworked to have the same scoring systems introduced in Mario Party 9, where players can now get in second, third, or fourth place, instead of only first place getting rewards. Starting off with the 4-player minigames, which this game mostly consists of, starting off with the few that were in Mario Party, the original. Now, I've said many times in the past that I am not a fan of Shy Guy Says. I get sick every time they bring it back. I will at least say that overall, it's visually more impressive on the 3DS, with more bright and vibrant colors. The ropes actually seem to be properly rendered in 3D this time, instead of being flat PNGs of ropes that are misaligned horribly next to each other. I do think the N64 version of the Shy Guy had a better outfit, though. The 3D model for the Shy Guy looks a lot better on the 3DS, but he feels so naked without that long captain's coat that he originally wore. They also changed the buttons for some reason, so instead of the A and B buttons, we now press the L and R buttons, which honestly feels more appropriate since we're raising left and right flags, so it makes sense to press a left or a right button. It would have been impossible to do that on the original N64 controller, since the L button was much harder to reach, since the joystick was much further away from the top left side of the controller. The remade music isn't too bad either. Now, despite the improved visuals and controls, I still don't like how much of a fake out this minigame is, and I do not consider it top 100 material. Bombs Away is visually more impressive than the Mario Party original, with more rippling water, a more detailed pirate ship and island. I think they made it a bit slower and easier this time around, Barely anything happened during my playthrough of this minigame. Only one person fell off, but everyone else felt like they were just glued to the arena. I think it would have been cooler to remake the Mario Party 2 version of this minigame instead, since it was a more insane version of this minigame, with the bullet bills and the giant torpedo at the end. The remade music isn't as good as the original tune. Otherwise, they did a fine job at remaking this minigame, and it is very iconic, so I do consider it worthy enough to be in the top 100. Facelift was one of my favorite minigames from the first two Mario Parties, so this will obviously be a recommendation for the top 100. This minigame was drastically changed on the 3DS. I do love Bowser's improved 3D model, but the minigame is now played with the touchscreen instead of the joystick and A button. Now, I don't mind using the touchscreen controls at all, but I hate how we're only controlling a silhouette of Bowser's face instead of just simply showing Bowser's full face on the touchscreen. It kind of ruins the charm of seeing ourselves pulling on Bowser's face when we can't even see it anymore. This is a more advanced version of the game, as it wants us to pull off trickier faces than before, and the CPU seemed to be a lot tougher and smarter at this one, even on normal difficulty, which is the easiest difficulty. It's otherwise an okay remake, but I think the original entry did this one a lot better. I wish they just merged the first and second games versions of this minigame, so we could be messing with not only Bowser's face, but randomly selected playable characters, including the new characters who weren't even in Mario Party 2, like Waluigi, Daisy, and Rosalina. Otherwise, yeah, this is a decent one. Wow, that's it for the 4-player minigames from the first Mario Party? Just 3? No Box Mountain Mayhem, no Crazy Cutters, Hammer Drop, Platform Peril, Hot Rope Jump, Treasure Divers, or Running of the Bulb? What gives? The Mario Party 2 version of Slot Car Derby is in this game, but it's heavily limited, for it only includes one of the 3-track variants instead of all 3 of them. It's arguably a lot easier this time though, since the camera now stays focused on our player, instead of panning in and out on all of the racers, which makes it harder to concentrate on our character alone. It's easier to speed up and slow down in this version, making it less likely for us to spin out of control like in the original. It makes it easier to see our characters smoking out so we can automatically slow down before they spin out of control. There's also a strange gimmick where if a player goes fast enough to catch up with a racer who fell behind, they can ram that racer out of the race. Now that's honestly a bit shocking. The 3D models and the characters' oversized heads look so much better in this remake. I overall do prefer playing this version over the versions from Mario Party 1 and 2, but the music is a lot worse than the track used on the N64 version. I still don't like this minigame very much though, but I do appreciate how they made it a little easier. I just don't consider it top 100 material. Shell Shocked is overall a huge improvement in the top 100 with faster controls and shooting. The Koopa tanks look a lot better and shinier than ever. I preferred the coloring of the checker patterned arena in Mario Party 2 a lot better. It had more contrasting colors that stood out better. There is sadly only one stage variant of this instead of all 3 from the original. Now I do enjoy this minigame, but unfortunately I think there are much better tank minigames in the series, like Mario Mechs from Mario Party 5. How is that not in this game? What the heck? That's one of the greatest 1 vs 3 minigames out there. I'll even say it's flat out the greatest 1 vs 3 minigame. How was that not in this game? So, it's a decent game, but there's many others like it out there that are honestly better. So yeah, I don't think it's top 100 material. Mecha Marathon is not a minigame I think highly of. I do like how the Mecha Fly Guys actually look like toy robots in this game, instead of just lazily using a 3D model of a fly guy with a wind-up on its back. I do prefer the Mario Party 2 version though, for each player had their own unique colored fly guy to match their color schemes, instead of the lazy red, blue, green, and yellow color schemes used in every Mario Party game since Mario Party 5. I really miss when each character had their own personal, unique colors that they got to use throughout minigames. I also liked how Mario Party 2 had more detailed and realistic looking colors with its environments. Instead of this bright orange dirt and bright green grass, it's honestly an eyesore to look at. I'm actually surprised they didn't rework this to use touchscreen controls. It would have made so much more sense to just draw circles to wind up the fly guy. I'm still not a fan of this one overall, and I don't think it belongs in the top 100. Dizzy Dancing was an okay minigame from Mario Party 2, but it was changed up quite a lot in this remake, and it was made a lot easier. So in the original version, the controls were randomized. Anything could have happened. Like moving up could have forced us to move left, while moving left could have forced us to move down. It really mixed up the controls every time, making for a fun and unpredictable challenge as we mess around with the controls until we get it right and try reaching for the music note in the center. On the 3DS, the controls are no longer mixed up, they're just reversed, so up is down and left is right, vice versa. And it's now a collect-a-thon. Instead of collecting just one note, we gotta collect many, as many keep spawning one after the other after one is collected. I still like both versions just fine though. It's hard to say like which ones are better than the other, they both work, but I still wouldn't consider them the greatest minigames ever. Mario Party 2's Hexagon Heat was an okay reimagining of Mushroom Mix-Up from the first game. I always preferred the colorful mushrooms from Mushroom Mix-Up compared to the hexagons. Admittedly, the 3DS did a great job at adding visual flair to this minigame. It was so murky and dark in the original Mario Party 2. This time they made it much more brighter and more colorful. They even added shapes to the platforms, supposedly to make it easier and more accessible for colorblind people, so now they can properly play this minigame. The controls are less slower and less clunkier in this game, so it overall makes it a much better remake compared to Mario Party 2's. Although I do prefer Mushroom Mix-Up, this is basically the same minigame, and I'll consider it worthy of top 100 material. Roll call for Mario Party 2 has been reduced to only having us count the Bob-ombs, so it doesn't have the Toad or Boo variants, unfortunately. It has the exact same gameplay of counting and subtracting Bob-ombs. I do prefer the background and colors of the N64 version, but I do appreciate how the Bob-ombs are fully rendered in 3D this time. They somehow took the most annoying music track in Mario Party 2 and made it even worse. It's a decent minigame, but I wouldn't really call it top 100 material. So they chose the Mario Party 2 version of Bumper Balls, but they only chose the lava variant, so it does not include the island or snow variant, which is unfortunate. It still plays fine, but I honestly prefer the visuals of the N64 version. The lava effects looked a lot better, and I like the brick tower design versus the checker patterned arena in the 3DS remake. It's odd, I was just saying how Hexagon Heat looked worse with the lava on the 3DS, yet the lava looked better for Bumper Balls on the 3DS. It's so weird. Despite how I prefer the N64 versions of this minigame, I do consider this worthy of the top 100. Honeycomb Haybock. One of the worst minigames in the series history. What is this even doing in the top 100? While the colors are too bright in the remake, it admittedly is prettier to look at. The fruits, the honeycombs, and the tree are actually rendered in 3D this time, though I think the bees are still flat sprites. There's actual grass planted beneath the tree this time, so it doesn't look like a dead dirt area, but this minigame is just such a drag, it's not worthy. Bowser's Big Blast is another minigame I despise. Man, for being one of the best entries in the series, Mario Party 2 sure has a lot of terrible dumb luck minigames. Well, the 3DS version of this is definitely more colorful, the explosion looks more impactful, and the plugs are actually 3D rendered this time. Considering how I think this is one of the worst minigames ever made, yeah, you can guess pretty well that this is not going to be on the worthy list. On to the 4-player minigames from Mario Party 3. Snowball Summit was my favorite minigame from Mario Party 3, so you know it's going to be in the top 100. I honestly prefer this minigame in Mario Party 3 though. I like the colors better, especially with the auroras in the background. The 3DS remake has a stronger texture on the snow, but I for some reason liked its appearance better on the N64. I like how the mountain looked less flat-topped on the N64. The music was much more pleasant in the original. Otherwise, yeah, it's a worthy one. Bounce and Trounce overall looks and plays much worse on the 3DS. The color palette looks so much worse, focusing on pink tiles instead of the purple and green tiles that contrasted pretty well with each other. It's worth noting that Mario Party 3 had a very unique art style in the series where the world looked like a giant pop-up book. So all these remade minigames on the 3DS scrapped the cutout art style from Mario Party 3. The N64 version had a real knockback when spinning into other players, but the 3DS knockback is very weak and sometimes it barely pushes anyone back. This one just isn't worthy. Rockin' Raceway admittedly looks a lot better on the 3DS. The more detailed art style actually fits this minigame pretty well. For some dumb reason, it scrapped the music from the original minigame and instead used the awful remade track used in Mecha Marathon from Mario Party 2. Yeah, for some reason, many of the minigames, they swap the music out with tracks from different games. I don't understand why. Sadly, I don't consider this minigame good enough for the top 100. For some reason, Toadstool Titan was renamed to Mush Pit. I like the arena in darker colors a lot better from the original, but overall, I find the gameplay of the 3DS remake better. It's cool how they replaced the mushroom with the Mega Mushroom from New Super Mario Bros. The player who obtains the Mega Mushroom has less of a control delay when transforming, and they have quicker recovery time after bumping into walls. This one is fun enough to be a part of the top 100. Storm Chasers was one of the only battle minigames from Mario Party 3 I actually liked. I really like the more detailed arena for the 3DS remake. So yep, it's another one for the top list. I never liked Chip Shot Challenge from the original, but I do like the improved visuals in the remake. I also like how we can press the X button to skip watching the CPU's turns. Why can't this feature be used in other Mario Party games? That is so useful. It makes the game go by so much quicker. It still did nothing to give us visual clues on the level or angles we need to properly aim in order to get our balls into the hole. So it really drags this game down. I never liked it originally and I still don't like it. I like the visuals of Ice Rink Risk a lot better in the original, along with the music, but I do like the controls a lot better on the 3DS version. It felt impossible to run or make a sharp U-turn on the N64, but it's now possible to do that on the 3DS, so yeah, I do think this one is worthy of the top 100. The Beat Goes On is an infamous minigame that many fans have vocally shared their hatred of, so why is this one even in the top 100? The visuals are a huge improvement, especially since the original orange tribal guys were just sprites and now they're actually 3D modeled. But the music has less of a punch than the brass and bongo sounds from the original version. Three Dwarf Monty was such a forgettable memory quiz. I like the scenery better in the original. The remake just looks so unnecessarily oversaturated. On to the Mario Party 4 minigames. Now, it's safe to say that most of the visuals for the 3DS version will look bad compared to Mario Party 4, for it was one of the most detailed looking entries in the series, and the 3DS wasn't as visually powerful as the GameCube. Booksquirm obviously will look a lot better on the GameCube with its more realistic color choices. I also love how fluffy the feather pen looks compared to the barely noticeable white feather model in the corner of this one. The controls and animation for the 3DS one feel so much choppier than they did on the GameCube. Otherwise, it's still a decent minigame worthy of the list. Trace Race looked and played a lot better on the GameCube with the more realistic shadows and having the crayon colors match the characters. Also, the drawing controls were easier to master, where the 3DS's circle pad limitates how much we can move the controller, so it makes it so much harder to draw like the curves and the circles. It's still a great minigame worthy of the list. Visually, 3-Throw looks very faithful to the GameCube version, with the only downside being that the characters' basketballs no longer match their color schemes. Otherwise, it is a worthy one. Mario Speedwagon looks so much worse on the 3DS. The vehicles have less personality, everything is much brighter and blander and less detailed. I just never liked this one. Paths of Peril looked and played so much better on the GameCube. I hate how piss yellow the cliffs are, and I hate how the ground looks more like it's made of orange vomit than dirt. The controls are so much worse with the circle pad compared to the GameCube's control stick. Otherwise, it's still a fun and tricky narrow race. On to Mario Party 5's 4-player minigames. Coney Island is my favorite minigame from that entry, and since Mario Party 5 is my all-time favorite entry, you know it's going to be on the top 100. My only complaint with the 3DS version is that the ice cream no longer looks appetizing. Seriously, what happened to the colors? The green ice cream looked like it was mint on the GameCube, and now it looks like slime on the 3DS. And the chocolate ice cream looks like crap now. It's still a very fun minigame. Pushy Penguins legit looks better on the 3DS with more shiny and rippling water, and everything looks less jittery. I do prefer the music from the GameCube version, but it's still a fun and chaotic minigame. It's legit crazy how many of the minigames from Mario Party 5, 6, and 7 look inferior to the graphics from Mario Party 4. The 3DS failed to make the Mario Party 4 minigames look a lot better or even as good as the original. yet many of the other GameCube minigames actually look better on the 3DS. Nightlight Fright looks so much better with its use of lighting, shading, and color. It felt like they barely used any shaders in the original GameCube version. It just made everything look kind of desaturated and like there was no shading or lighting whatsoever. Sadly, I don't consider Dumb Luck Games of Chicken to be top 100 material. Dinger Derby looks so much more colorful and the balls seem slightly easier to hit, but it's still a tricky yet fun minigame. I hate how they got rid of the detail where we could accidentally hit the balls into the crowd members though, but I still think it's top 100 material. For Leaf Leap, I think it looks visually better on the 3DS when it comes to the grass and beanstalk at least. It has less washed out colors and such, but the original had much better looking skies. The frame rate looks a lot choppier and worse on the 3DS, and it's more annoying as the sound effects are louder and the characters keep making grunts or sounds every time they jump. I prefer how much more quieter it was on the GameCube. It's still a fun platforming challenge. Triple Jump admittedly looks and plays a lot better on the 3DS with less washed out colors and less wonky looking animations of the characters hover. I'd consider this passable enough to be part of the top 100. This just reminds me of why I love Mario Party 5 the most. Just too many fun minigames. And yeah, only one bad Mario Party 5 minigame so far. That's not too bad. Later Skater looks and controls better on the 3DS as well. The ice looks more textured and glossy, like actual ice. It looked more like a wax floor on the GameCube. The controls are slightly easier. The music is much worse on the 3DS, however. There are many Mario Party minigames that are themed around racing a number of laps across a Figure Zero racetrack, but this ice skating variant of that minigame was always my favorite one of these types. So yeah, I'll give it a plus. Hotel Goomba had better colors and textures on the GameCube, and the impact from hitting the Goombas had more of a comical knockback compared to the 3DS's more stilted animations. It's still a fun set of push puzzles. Cajun Cooking looks more suitably darker on the 3DS, but the red tint shadows look kinda off to me. The minigame is a lot easier on the 3DS, giving players way more time than before to break out. But when Bowser chars a character, they no longer get burned black, which is kind of lame. It doesn't make it look as comical as it used to. It was one of the least annoying Bowser minigames, but I wouldn't call it one of the best minigames ever made, though. On to the Mario Party 6 4-player minigames. The snow in Snow World admittedly looks better on the 3DS with the bluish shadows, which add to the visuals, but I like the trees and ramps a lot better on the GameCube. It's a shame that the nighttime variant wasn't an option as well. I love the aurora-filled sky from the night version, but this is still worthy of the top 100. Catch You Letter is a surprisingly faster-paced one on the 3DS, which makes it even harder than it already was to return the mail to the delivery Shy Guy. This one does look more saturated, and I'd say it's still fun enough to be part of the top 100. I never liked Strawberry Short Fuse or any of the Dumb Luck Elimination games for that matter, but I do like how the floor pattern colors looked a lot better on the original version, and how dare they remove the Okiki's adorable chef hats in the remake. Ugh. I never liked Trapeze Artist either, since it takes dumb luck to win. There are a lot of times where the Goombas barely head towards your side, so how are you supposed to win when Goombas aren't even giving you a chance? I do think the less saturated colors look better on the GameCube version in this case. Dizzy Rotisserie suitably looks darker and more vibrant than the GameCube version. Unlike the Dizzy Dancing remake, the remake of Dizzy Rotisserie oddly keeps the randomized Dizzy controls instead of just mirroring the controls, so yeah, that's kind of strange. I still think this is a pretty fun challenge though. It's actually one of the few Bowser minigames I think are good enough on their own. Now on to the Mario Party 7 4-player minigames. The water in the final countdown looks slightly better in the remake, but I prefer the cliff colors and textures from the original, but I still don't consider this a very good minigame. Monty's Revenge looks really well remade on the 3DS, with more lush looking grass and textured soil. I love how they spruced up the gameplay as well, to where we can actually move the joystick to pop our heads out of different holes, instead of being stuck to one hole throughout the entire minigame. I still consider this a very fun minigame, but how dare they cut out the funny ending with the moles actually chasing the losers away with a hammer. But yeah, I think this one is pretty good. Pokey Pummel looks so much better on the GameCube with its grittier looking rock and soil and its bluer and cloudier skies, along with its less bright and burning colors. Otherwise, it's still a tiring, repetitive button masher. Track and Yield looks too oversaturated on the remake, and do we really need arrows on the conveyor to tell us what direction they're heading? What idiot needs an arrow to let us know that, oh yeah, there's a cliff behind us, you want to avoid that? It's an okay minigame, but it's just a weaker clone of better minigames like Platform Peril. Deck Hands is another dumb luck game of pick a card. I think the darker blue background actually looks cooler on the 3DS, but I prefer the character animations from the original GameCube version. It gave a little more believability to the characters being unsure of what card to pick. Why did they have to bring back the lousy microphone minigames? Balloon Busters, really? Isn't Bowser's Big Blast torture enough? They managed to make this one even worse. At least the original minigame could end after 36 seconds when the balloon popped once. Now it's an elimination game that takes nearly over 2 minutes to beat on the 3DS. So on the GameCube, after surviving blowing air into the balloon, that player would hide behind a shield, where if the next player pops the balloon, they and the other 2 players will get knocked out, while the guy behind the shield survives and they win. But now everyone but the inflator hides behind the shield, so it makes this torturous minigame drag on even longer. Dart Attack is yet another terrible mic minigame. I don't have much to say except the GameCube version has better looking contrast with the floor tiles, and the targets were actually easier to hit. Onto Mario Party 8. Once again, this was one of the most detailed looking entries in the series, so the 3DS remakes will once again look pale in comparison. Crank to Rank may not look as visually detailed as the entry from Wii, but it's not a bad attempt. It still has a lot of detail to it. So instead of using motion controls to crank the flagpole up, we use the touchscreen to draw circles to raise the flag. Not as fun as the Wii version, to be honest, considering how Mario Party 8 was the first entry to use motion controls. This was the first minigame to require rotating the Wii Remote like a crank, which was kind of fun. It was very different. There were clones of this gameplay used in later entries, but for being the first of its kind, I'll consider it worthy of the top 100. At the Chomp Wash no longer uses motion controls and has us washing the Chain Chomp by wiping it with the touchscreen. It honestly works a lot better than waving the Wii Remote in thin air. I'm kind of bummed that they cut out the intro where it showed our players painting a house before the Chain Chomp made a mess. So it kind of takes away a bit of the personality from the original minigame. But I love the little detail they added where after cleaning up the Chomp, it actually looks happy and grateful for what we did for it. So that's really cute. I'd consider this a top 100 game. Aim of the Game was an okay battle and duel minigame for Mario Party 8, but it's not as fun on the 3DS. Not only does the game not work as well when moving around with a circle pad and A button, the original it allowed us to point and shoot with the Wii Remote. That felt a lot better and more suitable. The cards spin a lot slower on the 3DS version, and they don't scatter around as much as they did on the Wii version, so it's a lot worse than the Wii version, but even then, it was an okay minigame, but I don't think it was really top 100 material. On to the 4-player minigames from Mario Party 9. Loggerheads was a decent quick-time minigame, but it worked better axing by swinging the Wii Remote compared to pressing the A button. I suppose it's still good enough, though. Bumper Bubbles was a minigame I hated, but I'll admit it actually worked better on the Wii. Not only were the Wii Remote motion controls better than the 3DS's lousy gyro controls, but the game's widescreen support allowed for more balloons to appear on screen at once. So it feels more limited on the 3DS's smaller screen. The animation looks and moves a lot more choppier on the 3DS, so yeah, this one does not get a pass from me. Don't Look definitely looks better on the Wii, mainly due to the better looking player models, but it works so much better gameplay wise on the 3DS. We actually used the D-pad instead of motion controls. I still think it should have been shorter than 9 rounds, but I'll give it a pass. I think Peak Precision looks a lot better on the Wii, with less burning colors, along with the way that the camera tilts upward the higher we climb. It really gives off a sense of scale. The climbing animations also looked more lively on the Wii. The 3DS version just looks very stiff and choppy. And the 3DS version had to replace the 1 and 2 buttons with the A and B buttons, obviously, and they actually did spice up the difficulty on the 3DS by adding 2 more buttons that were not on the Wii Remote, including the X and Y buttons. It's still a fun mountain climbing game that requires a lot of button chaining, so yeah, it gets a pass. Magma Mayhem visually glitched out on me, but even I know that it looked a lot better on the Wii than it did on the 3DS. It's arguably easier on the 3DS, where the tilting chandelier doesn't seem to slide the characters as much as the Wii version did. Now, there have been plenty of minigames like this in the past, where the goal is to push players off of an arena, but I do feel like this is one of the more unique takes on it, one of the more fun takes on it, because it's basically the same thing, but with a tilting arena, making it a little more challenging. So, I suppose it'll do. Speeding Bullets both looks and controls a lot worse on the 3DS. It still uses motion controls, and we all know how much worse the gyro tilting on the 3DS was compared to the Wii's motion controls. The frame rate is sluggish on the 3DS. I felt like Mario Party 8 had better motion-controlled vehicle minigames than this one, so I don't consider this to be good enough to compete with other better motion-controlled minigames. Jigsaw Jumble is admittedly better on the 3DS, where we actually use the touchscreen to complete the puzzle instead of pointing and clicking with the Wii Remote to drag and drop the pieces. I do like this minigame, but I don't think I'd consider it top 100 material. The water and Pier Factor looks a lot better on the 3DS, but the dock's colors look so much worse. Why did the 3DS games have to use such burnt colors overall? Otherwise, I absolutely hate these done-to-death dumb luck minigames. Goomba Bowling looks and plays a lot better on the Wii. It's more fun with the motion controls compared to just pressing the A button to bowl. The 3DS version does let us skip the CPU player's turns though, so that's a nice touch. It's an okay minigame, but I wouldn't consider it top 100 material. Flash Forward is one of the only few minigames from Mario Party 10 to appear in this game. Visually, it looks worse, but Mario Party 10 was the only entry in HD, so of course it's going to look worse on a console that can't even come close to HD visuals. The gameplay is the same as before. The novelty of fighting over getting a picture taken is still as fun and hilarious as ever, but it's less funny on the 3DS since the character models aren't as expressive as their HD models. I'll still say it's a pretty decent minigame though. Sword to Score was one of the most overplayed and annoying minigames for me in Mario Party 10, so of course I'm not putting it on this list. It's more colorful but less shiny on the 3DS. The frame rate is even worse, but at least we can actually skip the CPU turns this time around. Onto 1 vs 3. Sadly, there's barely any in this game, and the same goes for 2 vs 2. So let's start off from one of the ones from the first game. Tug of War from Mario Party admittedly looks better on the 3DS with its prettier sunset visuals, but it still uses the tiring gameplay of rotating the circle pad as fast as we can. Now I'm shocked they didn't give it touchscreen control options where we could keep drawing in circles to pull on the rope. So yeah, either way, I never really cared for this one. Piranha's Pursuit replaced the creepy running piranha plant with Petey Piranha. It honestly feels dumbed down on the 3DS. There's less noticeable rain. Petey doesn't grow as large or frequently as the original piranha plant, and we barely see Petey trying to bite the skateboarder, making him feel less threatening. The music is less ominous than the track used on the N64, and instead it uses unfitting music from the Ice Rink Risk minigame from Mario Party 3. The 3DS version just feels so much slower and easier, but at least swinging on the vines feels a bit more responsive this time. But yeah, I do prefer the N64 version in comparison, but I wouldn't call it a very good minigame either way. There are no 1 vs 3 games from Mario Party 2 in this collection, but there's only one from Mario Party 3. Tidal Toss admittedly looks a lot better on the 3DS, with more clear and shimmering water and a more detailed looking mountain. I do consider this one of the better 1 vs 3 minigames. From Mario Party 4, we have Blame It on the Crane. It's just a bit more saturated on the 3DS, but the movement feels less smooth. I never really liked this one. Goal has better looking grass on the 3DS, but there's a few visual differences. The Goal has square holes for the net, while the 3DS version used hexagon-shaped holes. The crowd looks a lot smaller on the 3DS, and they got rid of the Nintendo and Hudson ads on the soccer field. I mean, the Hudson one makes sense because unfortunately Hudson went out of business by this time, but I'm surprised Nintendo didn't feel comfortable advertising their own name. So the music isn't as good as it was on the 3DS, but I'd still consider this a pretty decent minigame. Hide and Go Boom admittedly has much smoother looking textures on the 3DS, but I do prefer the more realistic color palette from the GameCube version. But yeah, either way, I hate Dumb Luck minigames. Onto Mario Party 5. Heat Stroke is honestly the worst 1 vs 3 minigame ever made, despite coming from the best entry in the series. Visually, it looks uglier on the 3DS. Why does the sun look like it's dying, for crying out loud? Squared Away has a bunch of differences. Now in the original, the tiles were shaped like a heart, but are now shaped like Mario as he appeared in the original Donkey Kong arcade game. The flowers admittedly look better on 3DS, but they got rid of the thwomps in the background. The music and sound effects were a lot better on the GameCube. The 3DS no longer uses the clanking sounds when the blocks roll around, instead uses these lighter squishing sounds. It just doesn't fit the minigame well at all. Worst of all, they got rid of the hilarious ending where the minigame cuts off right before the loser trips and gets crushed by thwomps. So despite being inferior on the 3DS, it's still a solid 1 vs 3 challenge. 2-Bit or Lose It does look more colorful on the 3DS, but it controls a lot worse. The big inner tube doesn't gain as much speed as before, and its turning feels a lot stiffer. It was not remade well at all on the 3DS, but I'd still say it's fun enough to deserve to be in the top 100. Onto Mario Party 6. Creighton Peril looks more saturated on the 3DS and has been redesigned to work with tilting the 3DS to slide the Spinies inside the box. I feel like this would have worked better if it was remade for the Wii or Wii U instead. The original version had a useless need to have a split screen so it could show the player that's holding the box. That felt so unnecessary. What was wrong with just having it be a first-person game throughout? The 3DS made this easier by having the single player on the top screen, while the touchscreen shows the box that they're tilting. So it does look a lot better on the 3DS, but the split screen still feels very pointless overall. Why do we need to stare at the players blankly standing around holding a box? It adds nothing to the gameplay. I'll still say it's a decent minigame overall. Onto Mario Party 7 with Pogo A Go-Go. This is another one of the worst 1 vs 3 minigames I've ever seen. It feels very unfair for the 3-player side. I think it looks a lot better on the GameCube, where it had mistier looking clouds and a greater sense of depth. It also cut out the opening cutscene with the helicopter flying overhead. Yeah, it's a pretty lame and frustrating minigame. There are no minigames from Mario Party 8 on this 1 vs 3 list, so onto Mario Party 9 with Tackle Takedown. The 3DS version admittedly has better textures and it controls a lot better, since we're moving the characters with the circle pad instead of the D-pad. It's decent. Onto 2 vs 2, starting with the first entry. Desert Dash does look a lot better on the 3DS with better sunset lighting and ground textures. The blue thwomps were replaced with the classic gray spiked thwomps from the original Mario games. The characters are much harder to see under all this more detailed sunset lighting. It's more annoying on the 3DS since the characters keep shouting every time you move left or right. I wouldn't really consider this a fun minigame though, it's just easy and boring overall. From Mario Party 2, we have Handcar Havoc. It looks a lot better on the 3DS with less fog and more draw distance. The sound effects are also an improvement, but it feels more sluggish than before, not as fast-paced. I always preferred the Mario Party 2 version of this minigame compared to the more brutal Mario Party 1 version. I guess it's still a good enough minigame. Speed Hockey plays about the same as before. The CPU are still no help. I do like the sound effects and music from the original one a lot better, and for some reason it uses music from Mario Party 3 instead on the remake. Now this one can be fun to play with friends, but I don't consider it one of the best minigames. Cake Factory mostly plays the same, except we now only press the A button to pick up and let go of the cake or strawberries, where originally we had to hold and release the A button to pick them up. The conveyor belts are now pink and blue instead of yellow and pink. The cake and strawberries may use actual 3D models now, but they somehow looked even more appetizing on the N64. The cake icons were much more detailed on the N64 as well. They were much more simplified on the 3DS. So this was my favorite 2 vs 2 minigame from Mario Party 2, and I do think it's good enough to be on the list. Looney Lumberjacks looks more detailed on the 3DS, and it uses more realistic sawing sound effects. The music sounds worse on the 3DS though, but overall I really do like this one, as simple as it is. Onto Mario Party 3 with Eats a Pizza. The scenery looks more detailed on the 3DS, and the pizza itself looks even tastier than before. The music is very different though. I like the quirkier tune from the original game better. There's even the addition of gulping sounds as the characters eat through the pizza on the remake. So this was my favorite 2 vs 2 minigame from Mario Party 3, so it does get a plus from me. For Mario Party 4, we have the Great Deflate. I think the GameCube version is better in every way. The scenery looks more realistic and relaxing, like you really want a vacation there. The sound effects are so much better, as we actually hear air being pounded out of the inflatables, along with the comical thwomp sound effects as they get crushed. On the 3DS, it makes these distracting wobbling sound effects instead. The deflating animations on the GameCube look so much better as well. You can really see just the air getting sucked out of these things, and you don't really see much of an impact when looking at the 3DS version. Admittedly, the inflatables do look a bit too overly glossy on the GameCube. They look more like they're made of jello than pool toy material, but it's still a decent minigame overall. Reverse a Bomb is very similar on both consoles, but the 3DS uses louder sound effects. I honestly preferred the quieter sound effects from the GameCube version, but it's still a pretty good one. Order Up mostly looks and plays the same, but the GameCube version looks less shiny, and the 3DS version got rid of the welcome mat and the trash can at the bottom right. I think the food looked tastier on the GameCube version though, but yeah, I never really liked this minigame. I'm just not a big fan of memory matchup or memory games, so yeah. Onto Mario Party 5 with Defuse or Lose. I think it was called Defuse It or Lose It on the GameCube, so the name was simplified for the 3DS remake. Admittedly, it looks a lot better on the 3DS. The King Bob-omb looks more well-defined with a more detailed and higher poly mustache, narrower eyes, and a more detailed crown, and overall better animations. The background is drastically different. I have no idea what was going on in the original. It's clearly some kind of dream world, but why does the ground have such an ugly texture? Is that supposed to be grass? Why does it look like it has a thin layer of TV noise over it? So it was rethemed drastically on the 3DS to look like a brick castle courtyard, very fit for a king. So yeah, this is still a very fun minigame overall. As for Manic Mallets, I think it's too oversaturated on the 3DS. It's still a tiring button masher like so many other minigames, with nothing new to offer. Onto Mario Party 6 with Rocky Road. I like the visuals a lot better on the GameCube. It's less oversaturated, it's got better textures, and better looking water, but the rocks look like turds on the 3DS. The destruction looks more satisfying on the GameCube. The CPU are still slow and useless, but at least they're actually running towards the rock now and actually hitting it instead of just standing back doing nothing. It's still a very tedious minigame though. Slot Trot had better sounding sound effects on the GameCube version, but the 3DS version admittedly has more decent animations of the characters running on the slots. The CPU are more cooperative this time around, but I was still never really a big fan of this one. Onto Mario Party 7 with Sphere Factor. It looks more saturated and textured on the 3DS, though the soil looks more like sand than dirt this time around. The CPU are much more helpful this time around, while the CPU were terrible in the original version. It was still a very fun concept for playing with friends, so I'll give it a pass. Mario Party The Top 100 has the saddest collection of dual minigames. There's only 4. It makes you wonder why they even bothered. So Vine With Me from Mario Party 4 visually looks so much better, with more detailed looking trees and vines, but how dare they get rid of the giant piranha plant from the beginning. This was my favorite dual minigame from Mario Party 3, so it gets a plus from me. I have no idea why Careening Koopas from Mario Party 4 is on here. It wasn't even a dual minigame, it was a boss fight against Koopa. I like the design better on the original with the more detailed looking room, especially with the Koopa pattern floorboards. That was such a cute little touch. This one changed the gameplay by now using motion controls. Again, if it was on the Wii or Wii U, it might have been more fun. So it was one of the more tolerable boss minigames from Mario Party 4, but I wouldn't really consider it one of the best minigames ever made. Shy Guy Showdown from Mario Party 5 does look better on the 3DS, but it's still a very typical game of quick draw with random button prompts, nothing special. Button Mashers overall looks a lot better on the 3DS, but the blocks have such ridiculously strong textures. I prefer the softer looking textures from the GameCube version. The sound effects are more distracting in the 3DS version though, with the cartoony wobbling sounds that the characters make as they start aching. So it's still one of the most fun and craziest spins on the button mashing minigames. I normally don't like button mashing minigames, but I'll give this one a pass because it's so much fun with how you're not just button mashing one throughout. You gotta keep like adding onto them. You gotta keep piling them on top of each other, which makes it so tricky and uncomfortable, but so funny because you see the characters struggling as much as you are, and I'll give it a pass. And finally, we're onto the special minigames, mostly being single-player minigames. So Blockstar from Mario Party 6 is honestly my least favorite puzzle game from the entire series. Now, it's not bad, it's just not as fun as the other puzzle games across the series. There were so many better puzzle games more worthy of being on the top 100. It visually looks worse on the 3DS with smaller and darker colored blocks. This one just doesn't get a pass from me. Stick and Spin was one of the only few things I actually enjoyed from Mario Party 7. It's basically the same on the 3DS, but with more saturation. I do consider it one of the best minigames. Jewel Drop was the hidden jewel minigame from Mario Party 10, best part of the whole game in my opinion. Sadly, the minigame did not translate well on the 3DS. The colors look way too burnt, the music isn't as good, I really missed the harmonica solo from the original. Worst of all, they messed up the gimmick of shaking the controller to shuffle all the gems around in hopes of clearing them out. It works so well with the Wii U gamepad or even the Wii remote, but it does not do a good job at shaking the gems around with the 3DS's gyro controls. My only complaint about the Wii U version was that it had a ridiculously small screen ratio. The small screen ratio felt so unnecessary, but it's still bigger than the 3DS screen at least, so I'd rather play the original Wii U version of this. I still consider this a great minigame though, it truly is a hidden gem. Beach Volleyball from Mario Party 5 was renamed to Beach Volley Folly on the 3DS for some reason. It visually looks better, but it plays so much worse on the 3DS. The volleying is way too slow and weak, and there are times where spiking the ball is unresponsive. It's like I'm aiming and pressing the A button, and the character just doesn't spike it. It's like, what the heck? They got rid of the side modes where we could play with a bomb or a dice block that grants us bonus points depending on the number that lands when the ball hits the ground. It was given a lot of disservice on the 3DS. I never found it great to begin with, but it's so much worse on the 3DS. If you want a better volleyball game, just play Mario Sports Mix instead. Ice Hockey from Mario Party 5 got disserviced on the 3DS as well. It does visually look better with glossier ice and even scratch marks from ice skates, but the gameplay is so much slower. Again, there are better hockey video games out there, making this feel like a dull minigame in comparison. Badminton Bash from Mario Party 10 looks and plays very similarly to the Wii U version, but it admittedly controls better on the 3DS, using circle pad controls instead of uncomfortable D-pad controls. Hitting the birdie does feel a bit more responsive this time around. We're allowed to play a short 7-point game instead of a full 21-point game like on the Wii U version. Otherwise, it's still nothing special. Only 2 of the Donkey Kong minigames appeared in this game, both of which were from Mario Party 7. So Jumpman was one of the better DK minigames, being a nice tribute to the game that gave Donkey Kong and Mario their start. Visually, it looks more textured and vibrant on the 3DS, but I question why they didn't just remake this into a dual minigame. Why do we have to race against a CPU of Donkey Kong when it have made more sense to make this a one-on-one minigame so you can actually have a second player play it? I still consider it fun enough to be a really good minigame though. Vine Country plays about the same, but the trees look more textured and twisted. It's an okay minigame, but I wouldn't call it one of the greatest. And finally, we have the final battle from Mario Party 4. Considering how Mario Party 4 visually looked a lot better on the GameCube, I'm shocked that the 3DS version of this minigame actually looks better. The lava looks better, there's more suitable lighting and shading on the characters that actually reflect the lava surroundings, the sky looks cooler, they replaced Koopa Kid with Bowser Jr. While this minigame could be considered very easy for most older gamers, it was still a fun yet tough challenge for the small kids playing this game. So it made for a very memorable final battle in Mario Party 4, so I'll give it a pass. And with all of that, in my opinion, Mario Party The Top 100 has 51 minigames that I consider worthy of being in this game, barely more than half of the minigames included. While I found 49 of them to be very undeserving, there are at least 49 other minigames across the first 10 games that were more deserving to be in this game. Yet Nintendo keeps fooling themselves into thinking that people love the dumb luck generic minigames, or the button mashers. I'll never understand the decisions that company makes. So while this game does have at least 51 minigames worth playing, it doesn't change the fact that all 10 of the games that these minigames originated from are much better games than this. Even the lesser Mario Party games have more to see and do or offer, compared to this letdown of a game. Now, Mario Party The Top 100 is not for, say, a terrible game. Like, if this was the first Mario game you ever played, you might find it very enjoyable. But it will feel very pale in comparison if you play other Mario games down the line, and it will make this one look very weak in comparison. It just goes to show that a random grab bag of minigames is not what makes the Mario Party franchise so fun and memorable for many players. So I'm putting Mario Party The Top 100 on the bottom of the D tier list. I am positive that nothing will change my mind about this, because the next two Mario Party games I have to review are so much better than this game, so I'm positive that this will remain as the biggest letdown in Mario Party history. Luckily, Nintendo would retry this idea again a few years later with the second entry on Switch called Mario Party Superstars, which many fans treat as Nintendo's apology for the disappointment that was Mario Party The Top 100. Superstars brought back even more remade minigames, equaling to 105 minigames total. This time they're remade with HD graphics, and it even includes many of the minigames included from the Top 100. It also includes 5 remade board maps from the classic N64 trilogy, with 2 board maps from the first game, 2 from the second, and 1 from the third entry. It was overall a much better game than the Top 100, but I'll get to that one later. You know the Top 100 was bad when Nintendo decided that the next Mario Party game they needed to make had to be a reboot. Yep, they flat out rebooted the franchise. They didn't call it Mario Party 11, they started completely over. So next time, I'll be reviewing the first entry on Switch, which was the biggest comeback the series has ever gotten, also being the largest selling entry in the series. So join me next time when I look at Super Mario Party. That's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching, see you next time, and have a great day.